page. For privacy, we do not record during joys and concerns. Also, we save announcements for the end of service after the extinguishing of the chalice. We join together this morning to seek justice, equality, and fairness in the world. Our hearts are touched by the human need we feel around us, whether far away or within reach of our hands. We come here to be together because this is how we believe our lives are best lived. In questioning and in conversation, in compassion and in service, in gratitude and in joy, in companionship and in love. It is good to be together with you this morning. All right, I think this is going to be mostly a returning crowd. Oh, we've got a couple of newcomers here today, I'm sorry. For those who are new to us, please take note that we are a diverse group with a wide variety of interests and beliefs, and therefore our services are varied in format, tone, and topic. We encourage you to attend or view several services to gain a good understanding of our congregation. If you want to start receiving our weekly email newsletter from MVUC News, please write your contact information on one of the blue cards in the pockets on the back of the seats. And then there is a box on the greeting table out in the social hall where you can leave it. And now, please just take a moment to greet your neighbors. I'm a teacher. I will stand here and wait for the class to get quiet. Our chalice will be lit today by David Love. Yay. Please join me in reading the words by Emily Richards, provided for the lighting of the chalice. We gather this morning in a sacred space, kindling a fire that burns here in our chalice and in our hearts. We gather to engage in a different kind of worship, one that doesn't include sermons or hymns, but is holy nonetheless. We gather to honor our covenant and engage in congregational life, doing the necessary work to ensure that this community thrives. We gather together as a people of faith, guided by love, a love that burns as bright as the flame in our chalice. We light this chalice as we have done so many times before, for the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. And now I will hand things over to Tina for our story. All right, Lisa, come on up.
This thing on? Okay. Okay, so y'all are going to have to bear with me because I've never done this before. I'm super nervous. But I think I can read. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That is a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. No girl president? Ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls. Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace, I've been thinking it over, and I'd like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I have invited Mrs. Walker's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was captain of the science soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all, Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except for Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 17 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. That number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be a representative for your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes, Mrs. Walker explained. On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of all the electoral votes, Mr. Walker said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be easy, Grace thought. Grace came up with a campaign slogan, "Make history, vote Grace Campbell for president." Thomas came up with his own campaign slogan, "Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job." Grace listened to what issues were important to the students and made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school, no bullies. A cleaner school, no littering. Better hot lunches, no more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. Each week, the teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken, voters were making their choices. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment. After school, he played soccer. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad, she organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellowhammer State of Alabama cast its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. Fletcher said, the Lost Frontier State of Alaska casts its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. Hannah called out, the Grand Canyon State of Arizona casts its 10 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. And so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of the totals. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger State of Wisconsin casts its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes. She had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for, Wyoming. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas, he looked at Grace, he looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. "What are you waiting for?" Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The equality state of Wyoming cast its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers, thank you, and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. "Because," he said, "I thought you were the best person for the job." The following week, the students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. "My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States." This time, everyone believed that she would.
Now is the time for the sharing of joys, concerns, and milestones. Tina, please stop recording at this time.
Well, let's take a moment for joys and concerns to sit with those quietly. So this song is one we've done before, but it's a little bit complicated, so let's have a brief refresher. There's 3 melodies that happen in this one, and I'll just encourage you to look at the lyrics up on the screen rather than the blue book, because it's across a couple pages, and I'm not really sure we're in exactly the same order anyway, so we'll just follow the ones up there. The first part, here's the melody. We come from the fire, living in the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around. Try that with me. We come from the fire, living in the fire, go back to the fire, turn the world around. Okay, great. Second part is going to sound like this. Whoa, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Try that with me. Whoa, such is life. Ah, such is life. Okay, I'm gonna need more from you guys when we get there, but that's okay as a little practice round. And the third part is, do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Let's try that together. Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Okay, we're gonna go slow through it. Those are the three melodies. We'll get them as we go along. They loop around a couple times. We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. Mountain. We come from the mountain, living in the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. Whoa, such is life. Ah, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Abatewa, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Abatewa, oh, such is life. Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? One more time. Do you know who I am? Do you know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Whoa, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Oh, such is life. Get ready. Whoa, such is life. Abatewa. Whoa, such is life. Water make the river, river wash the mountain. Fire make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain. Spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit. Only can the Spirit turn the world around. Whoa, such is life. Ah, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Abatewa, such is life. Whoa, such is life. Abatewa, whoa, such is life. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
Opening words today are from the author Shia French. I was 17 when I learned what democracy was. I was with 75 young people at the Youth Empowerment and Spirituality UU Conference on Star Island as we chose our leader for next year's conference. It had only been a week, but I loved these people, and I was so damn impressed. The candidates had given short speeches about their hopes and commitments and left the room. We were left to decide. Each person who spoke did so constructively and kindly. People spoke about their leadership skills and how they felt in their presence. One friend of a candidate shared a concern about how one of the potential leaders managed their many competing priorities. Then we voted anonymously. In the 7 years since I bridged, I don't think I've been part of an election process run by adults that was so loving. In a sunny room, raised hands are the focus of this photo with a few blurred faces in the background. When I reflect on what made the yes elections work, despite disappointment by those who weren't chosen, I think it's because of the time we spent building relationships. Our nightly worship services were about connecting with each other and feeling part of a whole, more than about our individual faith journeys. We'd taken time to hang out casually, to build connection. In that election, we were able to think beyond who we liked best and think about what the group needed most. When I think about how democracy takes shape in a country of 330 million people, it seems almost inconceivable that we're talking about the same process as my 75-person youth conference used. But it gives me hope, too, that it's possible to learn about self-governance in the decisions we make in our families, schools, congregations, and conferences. Having relationships where we can speak truth to one another and disagree requires that we invest in each other. It means we must care about something bigger than ourselves, and these are skills we get to practice every month of the year, not just November. Each and every time we make a decision with another person or a group of people, we can practice democracy. Are we listening deeply to one another? Does everyone who wants to get to speak? Am I clear whether I'm speaking up for my own wants or needs or the good of the group? Are we following our own values? And perhaps most importantly, have we worked to build our relationships and truly know each other so we can respect each other when we disagree? When I talk to my students about the civil rights movement, it doesn't take long to realize how limited our views of that era really are. Usually I will ask them, how many of you learned about Martin Luther King? Every hand will go up. They'll stay up when I ask if they've heard of Rosa Parks. Most of them will say they learned about Malcolm X, but that he was only ever presented to them in direct opposition to King. Then I ask, have you ever heard of Ella Baker? My fellow teachers and professors in the room have all seen that deer in headlights look as the students are processing. Wait, is this something we're supposed to know? Was that in the readings? Oh my God, are we being tested on this? When I have had the pleasure of meeting people who were active in the movement, there are certain names that resonate with them in a way that I find striking. Their entire tone shifts. You can sense a reverence even in how they utter a person's name. For folks in the movement, Ella Baker was one of those people. I've never heard a single person who worked with her call her Ella. She was always Miss Baker to them. I love talking about Miss Baker's life and career with my students, in part because I know they've never studied her in their K-12 educations. More than that, I talk about her because nobody embodied a radical embrace of the meaning of democracy more than she did. Reflecting on her impact later in life, Miss Baker once said, "You don't see me on television. You don't see, or you didn't see, news stories about me. The kind of role that I tried to play was to pick up pieces or put together pieces out of which I hoped organization might come. My theory is strong people don't need strong leaders." Born in Virginia in 1903, Raised primarily in North Carolina, Ella Baker came from a long line of women who resisted oppression. Her grandmother told her stories of her own enslavement, including being whipped for refusing to marry the man whom her enslaver tried to force upon her. The family was particularly proud that they owned their own land at a time when far too many black farmers in the South were sharecroppers or tenant farmers working on lands they would never own. Baker graduated from Shaw University and HBCU in 1927 before deciding there were more opportunities waiting in the North. What we would see over the next 50-plus years was a life of activism devoted to the empowerment of others. When she said strong people don't need strong leaders, she understood that this strength is something that must be fostered. It was a strength rooted in meeting their material needs and in making them believe that their opinions and actions mattered. To address the first part, she joined groups or formed groups like the Young Negroes Cooperative League, a group that tried to maximize black buying power by promoting cooperative stores and bulk purchasing. She was instrumental in the 1930s in the Don't Buy Where You Can't Work campaign, leading boycotts against businesses located in black communities that depended upon their money but refused to hire African American employees. She continually pushed for civil rights protections at all levels of government to guard against racial discrimination in hiring and promotion. Baker understood that she understood these issues both as a way to empower people in their everyday lives and as a way of making political organizing relevant to the masses of people. But she was not content to lead in the manner to which we are accustomed. Miss Baker's greatest impact came through the work she did across multiple organizations, encouraging people from all backgrounds to get involved in movements for civil rights and to make their voices heard. In 1940, she got what she thought was her dream job, working as a field secretary for the NAACP. Her job was to travel the country, helping local people organize new branches or revitalize sagging ones. It was a job that kept her on the road for most of the year, visiting large cities and small towns, encouraging local people to join the association. Indeed, she was so successful in this work that by 1943, she became the director of branches for the entire organization, overseeing its recruitment work nationally. Thanks in large part to her efforts, NAACP membership rose from 50,000 in 1940 to over 500,000 in 1946. For her part, however, Baker didn't measure success by numbers alone. She once told a story of an organizing trip in the South. After giving her presentation in a local church, several people came to speak with her and ask questions about the NAACP. On the outskirts of the crowd, however, there was a black woman standing silently, shyly, observing what was happening. When the opportunity arose, Baker approached her. The woman appeared to be working class, not the usual middle-class crowd whom Baker regularly encountered in NAACP leadership circles. When Baker turned to her, the woman offered Baker a compliment about her hat. Baker, in turn, thanked her for the kind words and for coming to the meeting. She saw that compliment as this woman's way of trying to establish a connection. But, being unsure of where to start, she simply commented on her hat. Instead of simply accepting that compliment and walking away, Baker began talking to her. In doing so, she asked the woman what she thought the local chapter should be doing and what would help her life, her family, her struggles. Slowly at first, this woman opened up to her, began expressing her opinions, and by the end of the evening, she filled out her membership card for the NAACP. Moments like this were the reason Baker was so successful. They were also the reason she left the NAACP, at least its national leadership, in 1946. She faced opposition and criticism from those who wanted the local chapters to exist for two reasons: to pass along their membership dues and to support the issues prioritized by the national leadership. Baker resented this approach. While she did not dismiss the importance of the national office or its priorities, she felt that the best way to get people involved was by allowing them to set the agenda for their own branches. If they had a real voice in the decision-making process, if they helped to recognize the issues of greatest importance to their local communities, she thought that this would empower them to improve their own lives while also supporting the larger struggle across the country. Baker had seen too many examples of prominent local leaders from good families and possessing strong educational backgrounds who treated leadership positions in the local chapters as a mark of social standing. They were less concerned with the issues facing their community than with being able to brag that they were the president of the local chapter. Likewise, she feared that the national leadership in New York City was not always cognizant of what rank-and-file members wanted the organization to do. The issues they raised were important, of course, but what the national office wanted you to do was not always relevant to the everyday lives of people who formed the backbone of the group. When Baker left her national position, she remained active in the local NAACP in New York City, fighting against unequal schools, police brutality, and job discrimination. But her reputation as one of the best grassroots organizers in the country never diminished. In early 1956, when she heard about the growing impact of the Montgomery bus boycott and the economic retaliation against some of its participants, she joined with other progressives to form a short-lived organization, In Freedom, offering aid to those who were fired from their jobs or could not get lines of credit for their businesses. The following January, after the boycott's successful conclusion, Martin Luther King asked Baker to lead the work of creating a new organization of Black ministers devoted to nonviolent direct action, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. She did so quite skillfully, but also clashed with some Black men in the group who were not comfortable taking directions from a Black woman. Over time, Baker became disenchanted with the SCLC as she felt that it was primarily relevant not for its focus on nonviolent direct action by the masses, but for the charismatic leadership of King himself. As she once put it, quote, "In government service and political life, I have always felt it was a handicap for oppressed peoples to depend so largely upon a leader, because unfortunately in our culture, the charismatic leader usually becomes a leader because he has found a spot in the public limelight. It usually means he has been touted through the public media, which means that the media made him and the media may undo him. There is also the danger in our culture that because a person is called upon to give public statements and is acclaimed by the establishment, such a person gets to the point of believing that he is the movement. Such people get so involved with playing the game of being important that they exhaust themselves and their time and they don't do the work of actually organizing people." Ella Baker searched for a different model of leadership. Over the years, she put forth not a vision of top-down hierarchy, but of what she called group-centered leadership. And it was not until 1960 that she found a true outlet for it. When the sit-in movements took hold among Southern college students, there were immediate calls to organize these young activists through one of the traditional civil rights organizations. Baker convinced SCLC to fund a conference at Shaw University over Easter weekend to bring these students together. They listened as the leaders of the NAACP, the Urban League, and SCLC made their pitches as to why the students should join them. And then Miss Baker stood up. She told the students that they were already doing the work themselves. They did not need any of these groups to tell them what to do or how to do it. Instead, she encouraged them to form their own civil rights organization. This was the birth of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. And Baker accepted their invitation to help get the organization started. With her help, SNCC became the embodiment of what Carol Mueller calls participatory democracy. Baker insisted that the group's main focus should not be on creating opportunities for its members to become national figures. Rather, they should work in and with local communities, helping them to develop their own talents around the issues they deem important. Ideally, the work of SNCC would empower local people to the extent that SNCC itself was no longer needed, and the movement would carry on locally without them. Within the organization, they also adopted a radical approach to democratic procedures. SNCC staff meetings became the stuff of legends. They would not disperse until two things had happened. Everyone must have their say, and everyone must agree on a course of action. When you have organizers who are used to being the leaders in their communities and activist circles, think about what that means. They could not simply impose their will on everyone else. They had to sit and listen. Then they had to value the opinions and feedback of everyone in the organization, even those with whom they disagreed. And they had to actively seek out solutions that created consensus. It was not uncommon for meetings to start in the evening after the regular daily organizing was done and conclude the next morning as the sun rose to greet a new day. Think about that the next time you complain about any of our meetings for any committee at MVUC. Miss Baker, by then in her late 50s, sat with them until sunrise. She wore a mask because the cigarette smoke exacerbated her asthma, and she never told them what to do. Rather, she asked them a question: will this help towards accomplishing your goals? During its brief but impactful existence, SNCC helped redefine an era of American history. Its emphasis on group-centered leadership and participatory democracy did not mean that everything was peaceful or idyllic. People argued, egos swelled, disagreements sometimes turned very ugly. But there were so many things to love about this group and its vision. Sometimes when they argued over whether to pursue one course of action, they realized it was okay for some people to do one thing and some people to do the other. They built meaningful connections with local people across the country and helped bring public attention to amazing grassroots leaders who would have been ignored by traditional civil rights organizations. SNCC was not the end of Baker's activism, which continued into the 1970s and 80s. She continued to be active in matters around African American civil rights while also supporting Puerto Rican independence and opposing nuclear proliferation. But SNCC still stands as the symbol of Baker's vision. I've been thinking a lot about Miss Baker this week, both in preparation for today's congregational meeting and amid current events. Her career and its reverberations through our society right now help us to understand that democracy is messy. Ella Baker believed that to truly achieve democracy, the people need to actively involve themselves in all aspects of society, that they need to foster a better understanding of how society works and how it can do better. but that ultimately the push for change would come from the people themselves, not from so-called leaders. I've thought of her as I reflect on the largest drives for union membership in decades. She spent time in the 1930s working for the WPA, teaching night courses on economics to working class people in New York City. She took advantage of the opportunity to teach them about economic inequality and the importance of union organizing. I've thought of her as I see attempts to repress student activism, especially the actions of Columbia and Vanderbilt universities against pro-Palestinian demonstrators this week. Not only did Ms. Baker believe in the ability of young people to radically shape our world, she also stressed the necessity of mass action, of public demonstrations that teach us the will of the people and give them a chance to be heard. I've thought of her as we prepare for another presidential election this fall. Ms. Baker encouraged people to get out and vote, leading efforts for voter registration and voter education across the South. But she also emphasized that voting was only one tool available to us, and that many people who want to have a say in our society may not have that right. And I thought of her as I reflect upon this congregation and our shared faith. How many faith traditions include, as a core tenet of their religion, the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large? Instead of glossing over that idea, think of the radical implications of it. And for the record, Baker loved the word radical. She loved it and talked about how she appreciated its original meaning, its etymology, going back to the Latin for the root of the matter. We are not asking you to come and sit passively once a week as we share our vision of the world. We are asking you to directly participate in the work of this congregation. We are inviting you to be part of our experiment in participatory democracy, in which we depend upon each other, share our gifts, and all have a say in the decisions we make together. This is why we keep asking you over and over, what do you want to see from this congregation in the future? It's not a rote exercise for us. It's a genuine question intended to remind you that you are a key part of this beloved community. Without all of you, without the energy and ideas you bring to this congregation, MVUUC would not exist. It is also why we ask you to join a committee, to submit a pledge, to participate in services, or to share your wisdom and your truth from this pulpit. Even in our worst moments, when we see so many examples of people who are only concerned with power rather than justice, we continue to believe in one another. Our faith asks us to be equal partners in the search for greater truths. And in that search, do not discount your own power. Embrace it. Let it wash over you. Let it remind you how important you are to us, how important your voice is to our faith community, how you are as much a leader as anyone else here. In these walls, as in our larger world, we need one another to realize our best selves. Let us set an example of love, compassion, empathy, and yes, democracy, which we wish to see in the world around us. May it be so.
And number 404, what gifts can we bring?
Now we pass our offertory basket. All donations are gratefully welcome. If you make automatic pledge payments, please place one of the yellow cards indicating this support in the basket. Thank you. Our closing words today are from Heather K. Janules. From the power of our memory and history, with high hopes for the days that lie ahead, we gather to craft the destiny we share with one another. We gather with faith in the practice of democracy. We gather with hearts and minds open to the wisdom in every voice among us. In our gathering, may we dream and design a bold future. May we bring our best selves to this service, and may we dream these dreams and do this work with love. Amen. Yep. Now, all right, we'll get there. Yeah, we're fine. All right, now we will extinguish the chalice. Please join me in the words from Amanda Alice Julian that you already see up there. Together, we have enjoyed the warmth and beauty of where we go. Oh, different one. That's what was happening. Okay. I'm just going to say it though. Together, we have enjoyed the warmth and beauty of stories of this flame and of this special community. As our chalice flame is extinguished this morning, we can still remember that its glow is carried within us. We can use our inner lights and this flame to kindle new sparks throughout our lives and in the world. May the spirit of peace and togetherness bless your lives. Now is the time for announcements. I think whoever between Megan and Lisa races up here first. All right.
I'll be super quick. Those of you who are members, please plan to stay for a few minutes after service today for our congregational meeting. We only have 3 items of business, so if the planets align, it will be very short. Here's hoping. And second, this is seems like a small thing, but Lisa mentioned earlier that there was a plumbing issue in the women's restroom, and it was because there was way too much toilet paper stuck in one of the toilets. So this is a public service announcement. Please don't do that. Treat our plumbing very gently. Don't just use the minimal amount needed of toilet paper. And if you have young people in your lives, okay, if you have kids who are using the restroom facilities, please remind them to only use what they need because we have to be very careful with our plumbing. Thank you.
And I will jump on top of that and say, even if the feminine hygiene say they're safe to be flushed, we have a garbage can right next to each toilet. Please put them in there because it's a lie. It's a huge lie, and it just causes issues. So do that. Okay. That's right. So also, I don't know if you guys realize this, but there's a blood drive. And I know, shocker. It is next week somehow. I don't know how that happened, but it's next week. And I just want to remind you, please, we still have appointments available, so tell everybody you know. And I do have an event on the MVUUC Facebook page, so if you have Facebook, if you could go to it and then like share it in all your news feeds, that would be fabulous. Also, I'm still taking food items, so if you like to cook and you want to donate something to the drive, let me know, send me an email, or come talk to me directly, or slip me a note, or, whatever. You can text me, you can call me. I'm in the directory. It's Saturday, 9 to 2. And the last thing I have is one of the things that is being changed/repaired here is that on our emergency exit doors, we are putting in the push bars that they really are supposed to be. And so we have the bars. We're going to do one in RE and one over here. And my husband, Bob, has graciously offered to put them in. But, he wouldn't mind a hand or two. So if you would like to help him out with that, even if it's just like handing him stuff, that would be fantastic. That will be obviously after the congregational meeting.
Hi, my name's Winnie. Two quick announcements. The Rock the Block event that happened a couple weeks ago is going to be extended a bit, and we're going to catch up on a couple houses to do some things that we weren't able to do on April 6th. So on May the 4th, we can use volunteers if you can. We're going to go back to a few of the houses and a couple new ones, do some painting and planting, which we couldn't do a little bit earlier in April. Hopefully it will be warmer then. They're going to plant some shade trees and native perennials at some of the houses. So if you're able to help with that, let me know and I can get you all the information for that. Also, I just wanted to let people know about the Open Circle discussion group. We had a lively discussion today, and just wanted to let you know the two upcoming things that we have planned. On the 28th, we'll be talking about genetic testing and personal privacy. And on May the 5th, Greg Brunell is going to lead a discussion about Society's Child by Janice Ian, if any of you remember that, and some of the racial implications of that song. And I wanted to extend to everyone, if you have ideas that you would like to see discussed, bring them to us. You're welcome to lead them, or if you want to suggest an idea to Will or I, we'll be glad to fit those into our upcoming schedule. Thank you.
All right. After our closing song, don't you dare move. All right, the new folks, you can go. It's fine. It's fine. After our closing song, however, yes, for those who are members, please stay for our congregational meeting. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ted for our closing song.